Okay, cool. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My neighbor decided to leaf blow his entire property at this exact moment, so I apologize if there's some background noise. In the meantime, let's kick things off. So we're doing something in a slightly different format than we've done before, and I wish I could claim credit for the idea, but it was actually the Centrifuge team and Cassidy who came to us with this kind of concept. So I love it. Let's kick things off. We have some great guests up here, and I mostly just want to hand the stage over to them for this session. So as a reminder, my name is Katie. I run marketing for Moonbeam Project. We also have, I think it's Kenny from Manta, although when he speaks, I'll be able to confirm or deny.
Ta-da.
Hello, hi. And then we have Alexi from Interlay, Cassidy from Centrifuge, and Phil from the Parity team. So if you guys each want to give a quick intro to yourselves.
Yeah, sure. I guess I can begin just in the order of the introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Kenny, and I'm one of the core contributors to Manta Network. Manta Network is building a privacy layer for the entire Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems. Our Kusama Canary Net is Calamari Network, and we are using zero-knowledge proofs to be able to privatize and transact or swap all parachain assets. That's Manta.
Hey, I'll go next. Thanks, Kenny, and thanks, Katie, for hosting this. That'll be also awesome to hear some of your perspective on the things that we talk about. So I'm Cassidy, and I'm working on token design and research at Centrifuge. We're the same team behind the Altair Kusama parachain. My background's in economics, and Centrifuge, as many of you may know, is we think of it as real-world DeFi, enabling users to token their assets in the real world and finance them on chain, plugging into DeFi liquidity in places like Maker and super soon Aave. And then I'll pass it over to Phil or Alexi.
Hi everyone, this is Phil Lusak from Parity. I do ecosystem communications. Been working at Parity for about 4 years now, and we are the team that's been building Polkadot and the Kusama network. We've done a lot of infrastructure level technology from Ethereum, Bitcoin, Zcash, and so on, but now we're focused on Polkadot and Kusama. So, and interoperability is a huge part of what we're doing, if not everything. So I'm excited to get this talk going.
All right, then I'll go next. So hi, I'm Alexei. I'm one of the co-founders of Interlay and focus a lot on the protocol side of things there. So what we're doing at Interlay is we're building a decentralized network that connects cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to DeFi platforms like Polkadot, Ethereum, and Cosmos. So of course, the first step and first thing that we're doing is we're building InterBDC. It's a one-to-one Bitcoin-backed asset that's fully decentralized, collateralized, and censorship resistant, and will allow anyone to access DeFi with their Bitcoin within the Polkadot ecosystem and beyond that. And of course, interoperability is basically what we do, essentially.
And I want to throw in a humble endorsement here that these are some of the best tech teams that we've seen on the Polkadot side. And so we have relationships with each of these teams because they have been so proactive about interoperability, but they've also just been good stewards of Polkadot and good kind of cooperative folks to work with. So that is what makes me really excited for today's topic, which most folks kind of teased, but the main core of the topic is interoperability in the DOTverse or .samaverse in many cases. And so with that in mind, let's focus on the Kusama piece for a minute. It's easy for us to kind of move on from this Kusama topic once the crowd loan is done, because that's such a competitive, high stakes part of it. But of course, so much work goes into deployment and success after crowd loan auctions are completed on the Kusama side. So with that in mind, I know at various stages, I think all three, Manta, Centrifuge, and the Interlay teams have all run crowd loans, have all had successful crowd loans on Kusama. Do you guys have anything you want to share from a reflection standpoint about how those went, what you thought was interesting and notable coming out of those?
Sure.
Right. Or go ahead, Alexi.
I'll keep it short. I mean, I think what we went through with Kintsugi was basically a roller coaster of emotions. So I think what we learned was that you definitely need to come prepared and don't announce too late, because essentially we were catching up to everybody else throughout the entire crowd loans. And on the other hand, well, you basically have to expect the unexpected, because in the end, our community did come through, and we did win one of the parachain slots and had a very intense battle with Altair and Parallel Psycho. And I think one big lesson to take away, and for anyone who's essentially considering to do a crowd loan later on, is be careful with the hard cap, because it can actually kill you, like it did in our case. We maxed out and we couldn't beat Parallel anymore because of the hard cap. And essentially Parallel only had to get one KSM more than we did to beat us for the parachain slot. So that's the thing. I think one of the main lessons that we took home for these upcoming DOT auctions.
I think it's funny that, I mean, you know, we love these other teams here. We think everyone here is doing super great work, and it definitely adds this competitive aspect to it. At the same time of like wanting to win a slot with Altair, we also really wanted Interlay to also win a spot. So that was kind of an interesting position to be in for us. And I think in overall, we found it really exciting, but also super chaotic. And I think we learned a lot because we didn't really know, none of these teams knew what to expect going into the Kusama auctions. And I think one of the biggest cool learnings that we had was just how much community support the whole Kusama ecosystem has. And then especially to see that come to Altair with one of the highest number of the individual contributors in a crowd loan was really exciting for us as a team to see just how much support this whole ecosystem has, and how much participation there is from the Kusama community.
I think one of the things that is most striking about kind of the lessons learned, especially from that second batch of parachain auctions, that's 6 through 11, because we had Interlay, Kintsugi kind of tagged on there at the end. But one of the things that I think is interesting that Cassidy touched on is, like, you know, Kintsugi adds value to the whole ecosystem. And so it is something that's really interesting to have to compete with as a parachain, because you also, there's so many other pieces to this puzzle where you want everyone to be successful. And very truly, like, this whole interoperability message doesn't work unless there's lots of promising projects that are worth connecting to and interacting with. So it kind of presents an interesting challenge from that regard. I don't know if you have anything that you want to add from Parity's perspective on not just, you know, interoperability between parachains, but even things like, I think the Kintsugi parachain auction was really interesting because it does add value to the whole ecosystem. And it was one of those that was like a little tricky from a hard cap perspective, where they kind of almost, you know, they were definitely at a disadvantage by a matter of a couple of KSM.
Yeah, I think, like, if anyone's been following Polkadot since the early days before we've launched, it's always been a huge aspect of our ecosystem is to build out bridges to Bitcoin and Ethereum. And obviously having that outward interoperability outside and beyond the Kusama and Polkadot networks is something that's invaluable and something that we need going forward to really go with the interoperability that we've been going for. So that was really great to see. The caps were also very interesting to see, you know, different teams choosing different caps and so on. And yeah, that little difference definitely made a lot, and it kind of really helps us realize that Kusama is doing its job as being this a testing ground, a proving ground for what's coming on Polkadot. And I think all the teams here who have done crowd loans on Kusama, and the other teams as well that plan on also doing a crowd loan on Polkadot, have learned a lot, and we have as well. It was great to see how the community participated. It was also, I think, one of the most interesting takeaways from the crowd loans was the way that Altair finished with the randomized ending in the candle auction, how they just got away with the crowd loan. If anyone looks back on that, that was one of the most exciting finishes I think we'll ever see in any crowd loan.
Yeah, I think too, maybe you can speak about this a little bit, Cassidy. One of the things that was really interesting to me about what Centrifuge and Altair did is you guys sat out this first batch of 5 and kind of said, like, no thank you for Polkadot. I'm assuming based on kind of the experiences and the learnings from that first round with Kusama, where things were a little bit wild with the first few parachains. Do you have a couple of comments you want to make on that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, part of it is definitely to take some time to focus on Altair, the launch that we're rolling out, because we did the batch 2, and so that's been a lot of work on our side. But also has the advantage of learning a lot from the people that pushed first, like Moonbeam and Akala, and I think Manta, you're up there, a couple of others as well. And I think it is a really nice for us to have that learning experience, seeing that the first batch go live. But I think the other key thing for us that you mentioned earlier, Katie, is we really need all of your other projects to go live so that we can realize the vision of Centrifuge. Using dApps that go live on Moonbeam, potentially funding a pool with D. I think using Akala USD also to fund pools, all these things are like things that we need from other parachains and need those other parachains to go live. And so for us, it's it also didn't necessarily make sense to go right for the first batch, because we can wait for you guys to launch, and then we'll be ready to go and actually start integrating with all these other great projects once we go live.
Yeah,
Sort of on that. Oh, go ahead, Kenny.
No worries. I think also, a really interesting aspect about round 2 versus round 1 was that, I think the dynamics really changed in terms of the audience demographic, right? When you think about round 1, these are all people who knew that the Kusama auctions were coming up and happening, right? People who are essentially plugged into the ecosystem. I think when round 2 started, right, it was a little bit after round 1. And so there has been a lot of news about it, a lot of hype about it, a lot of success from round 1. Right. And so that, I think, brought in a larger audience into the community who just weren't previously exposed to the Polkadot or Kusama ecosystems. And, from an economics perspective, right, like, and Cassidy, don't take me here as professional talk, but just in terms of like the amount of contributors, the amount of crowd loan KSM, right, I think like overall it was a lot higher than the previous round. But that's because I think the previous round did a really good job of just growing the entire Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem.
I'm actually curious, what do you guys think is going to happen for the Polkadot auctions? Will we see a similar thing happen with a lot more noise for round 2?
My bet is yes. You have a 28-day on bonding period. It's pretty tough for people to get in the first couple of auctions with that. I think Manta is going to have a wild time here at the end of this this 5th auction, because again, like if you saw those first couple auctions happen and didn't have a chance to get in, you have time to get in for this last one.
Yeah, and also sorry, go ahead.
I'd chime in and say probably I'd love I'd really hope that we get a lot of action in batch 2. I do, however, think it's going to be a bit different to Kusama, because people had a lot of time to realize what these auctions can do. So I think we've seen a lot of the initial push come for like the first batch. And my feeling is it's maybe going to be less action in batch 2, but maybe also because it's Christmas. But I do very much hope for heartbeat final like last time.
Yeah, I was going to echo Alexi's sentiment. And yes, the last slot is very stressful.
Yeah, I figured it might be for you. But it'll be interesting too. So just to follow through on the things that Alexi had mentioned as well. Like something that's interesting is dot holders are much broader as a group, right? And a lot more mainstream people have dots. Crowd loans are still kind of a scary concept, but I know at least from our perspective, we did see a lot more exchanges and wallets and third parties support the crowd loans this time than previously. So I think my hope is, as much as this 5th slot is going to be wild, and I'm hoping for kind of a fun showing from the teams involved, I do think the second slot, that second batch, is going to be pretty interesting, because we do have the potential for pretty broad participation. Folks who would not have normally watched this crowd loan process now have seen it in action and hopefully are starting to develop some sort of comfort with how it works and the parties involved and why it does or doesn't matter if you contribute in one way versus another. So I'm hoping that there's some learning there. But I mean, Bill, do you have some perspective that you want to add on this too, as kind of the voice of reason from Parity?
Yeah, not really much more. It's not like we have any info. You know, we're in the network just as much as anyone else, and as far as like what users choose to do. Yeah, but we're just happy to see the amount of engagement from the dot holders and Kusama holders for this. So far, I would say it's been quite a success.
I certainly would echo that. There's much broader participation than certainly I ever imagined. And I think it's good. It's a lot of people in my personal network are now asking me about Polkadot in a way that they weren't before, which is an interesting dynamic. But just to kind of close out this piece of it, we talked quite a bit about the Kusama auctions, but I want to give each of you the time to give kind of an update on where your Kusama deployments are right now.
Yes.
I can start with Altair. Sorry, always hard to know who's going to talk first. So we are in the middle of the launch process still, and our next runtime upgrade is going to be to enable democracy so that the AIR token holders can elect an on-chain council and really begin to bring full control of the parachain over to the token holders. And then once the council is elected, we can expect the next phases in the new year. So that's going to be AIR transfers and then our first use case NFT studio, which we're super excited about.
I guess I can go next with Kintsugi. So essentially, we similar to Altair, we essentially joined the game in one of the later slots. So essentially had a little bit less time to prepare everything on Kintsugi before the batch 2 dot auction starts. But essentially, we're actually very, very close to completing the launch. I guess it's quite similar to the stages of Altair. So over the next weeks, and I'm saying weeks, but it's going to be shorter, the airdrop of Kint will happen, and at the same time, essentially, democracy will kick in. We don't have a council, so we actually went for a liquid democracy model, combining liquid democracy with what you see in Curve. Basically, you need to stake to participate in governance. And once distribution is live, then of course, similar to Altair, community can then vote to enable transfers. And then after Christmas, also giving everybody some time to experiment and get ready, we'll then propose to the community to enable KBTC minting, and then we'll have first Bitcoin on Kusama. So it's literally now only a matter of weeks. And we're all super excited and working overtime to get Bitcoin onto Kusama as soon as possible.
That's awesome. I can't wait to try Bitcoin on Kusama. And for us, I guess we came in a little bit earlier, same round, just different slots. And we have done the 3 runtime upgrades. One has its own sort of backstory about like the community governance tokens. And then the second one was actually for on-chain governance, and the third was to enable token transfer and token vesting. And now we're releasing our testnet this week, but it's not exclusive to Kusama. It's its own testnet. We codenamed it Dolphin. And then we also have one more runtime upgrade happening next week before the end of the year, and this one's actually going to be our first community-driven runtime upgrade. So it's going to be based on governance decisions. So we're pretty excited to start getting the community involved.
You guys have such great branding on everything at Manta. Between Mandalorian and Dolphin Testnet, I'm incredibly jealous. Cool. So
let may or may not be infringed.
I'm not going to dwell too much on that. I'm sure Disney is not at all litigious about things like that. So the Polkadot auctions, I know we're kind of in the middle of, I think, slot 4 or auction 4, I should say. And it seems to be that Parallel is in the clear lead here. But I know, Manta, you guys are very much in the running for that 5th slot. Do you have anything you want to reflect on from that perspective? Or really, I can open this up to the whole group in terms of what we've seen in this first auction or auction batch and any opinions you may have on that.
Yeah, I think just like more of a high level opinion is that we are very focused on getting the slots, right? And the communities are all very focused on helping their projects win the slots. And it's just a great event for each of the projects that are participating. And it's always true, but I think there's something really special about the first round of auctions because these are really the first projects that are going to be coming out to represent the entire Polkadot ecosystem, what it's possibly capable of, right? And getting other people very interested and excited about what's being built on there, much like how you guys did with Kusama. And I think that was wildly successful just based on the how many participants started joining in on the second round, right? And as the winners of this slot, or as the winners of this round of auctions, right? I think it's important not just a perspective of like having projects launch, but also from the perspective of being like that representative of the Polkadot ecosystem, because you guys, and maybe us, maybe not, but maybe in a hypothetical would essentially be the leaders in this space, in the sense of, right, like as new projects come on board, as new projects begin their onboarding process after winning a parity auction, right? I think it definitely would be our responsibility, not just as a project to build a good project, but also to help guide other projects in the ecosystem, right? Like, I mean, I was talking with you guys, I think last week when we had that in-person meetup, and I was talking with Derek, and he was telling me about the governance runtime upgrade that you guys did, and how there are two options, and one definitely works, and the other one definitely would have kept them up at night, or kept you guys up at night. So like just getting that sort of guidance, just to know that as we prepare for our governance-based runtime upgrade, like that was, that helped us avoid a lot of things. And I think that's the exact sort of sentiment that the projects in the first round of auctions should be taking, right? Not just leaders, not just great projects, but also leaders in the space.
We may or may not have stalled the network with that governance upgrade, which is a fun fact. So we're happy to help others avoid that. That was an early learning on the Moon River network that certainly kept us up at night. So just kind of shifting gears now, I know we've talked a little bit about the parachain auctions on Polkadot as well, but let's talk about the value that each of these parachains is bringing to the DOTverse, the Polkadot ecosystem. And can you guys, I guess, each give your opinion on not just what you're working on and why you think but why it's important to the overall ecosystem. And something for me to add quickly to this, something that I think people forget is, as well as Polkadot's done to date, this is without smart contracts. Like, we're about to really unlock some fascinating technology for these parachains that are deploying, and see what I expect to be a pretty drastic uptick in usage and transactions and so on Polkadot. But there's other things happening too. So if you guys each want to maybe color what you think, your parachain is going to bring to the ecosystem. Should I call on people? How about Alexi? I feel like you've been second, so let's make you go first this time.
Right, sure. I mean, I guess from our perspective, I mean, we're in a position where we actually bringing an asset, right, as main product. So for us, it's really important that there are smart contracts and functionalities where InterBDC can integrate, which is also one of the reasons why we're going for batch 2 in Polkadot, for example. So our entire initial product InterBDC lives off interoperability. And we really hope, and we're super excited to see all the developments that are happening on other chains. And I guess similar to also what's Centrifuge and Altair said, is we need everybody else, and we really hope that everyone's successful, and we'll try to contribute where we can. I mean, what we do is we really try to also contribute to the substrate code base and fix bugs as we find them on our side, hopefully to just help accelerate development, and are also keen to integrate XCM with any parachain that's ready. And without leaking too much, but we're making very good progress on Kintsugi already, and we are very, very happy and excited that we'll probably have first XCM transfers and KBTC and Kint dApp integrations early January.
Maybe I can jump in next. I think maybe to echo that, I feel like, to use a buzzword, I think one of Polkadot's killer features is interoperability, mostly because it's really built into the core structure of everything that these projects are building on. And at Centrifuge, we really think that the more integrations that we have across projects, the greater the flow of value will be into the entire Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems. So, Centrifuge specifically, right now we have a standalone substrate chain We have this real world asset financing dApp Tinlake that's live on Ethereum, has almost 50 million in TVL. But we think that that can grow exponentially once we start connecting to these other pair chains. So to give some examples, right now we're only financing these assets with DAI on Ethereum. But if we could also finance them with the Akala dollar or with maybe BTC on Kusama or Polkadot, maybe even other like Polkadot native, Kusama native stable tokens as well. I think that can really add to the growth of our project as well. So it's really like working together with each other, finding that interoperability is going to help grow all of these different projects together. I mean, also Moonbeam, what you guys are doing is awesome because it just makes it so much easier for Solidity-based apps to just move over seamlessly into the Kusama and Polkadot ecosystems. And we're already working with teams like MakerDAO and Aave on Ethereum, and it just makes it so much easier to then like really seamlessly work with those teams though, in the Kusama and Polkadot space. And I think all of these different integrations across projects is really going to grow the value of the entire ecosystem together. And I think it's really going to show how valuable Polkadot is, both as a technology and also as a community and ecosystem.
Yeah, and also, Manta. But I think like one of the things that is, as to echo Cassidy, right, not to jump on the hype train, is interoperability, and I think that for the first time, like this interoperability here is going to be pretty seamless across layer one. I think people might take for granted this idea of interoperability because there's Ethereum and then smart contracts on top of Ethereum, and you can lend different tokens, you can borrow, you can transact, et cetera with different tokens. But that's really just the token layer, right? Like really having layer one networks communicate with each other, send data across to each other, right? Like I think that is really a big breakthrough with Polkadot and Kusama. And so I think like having this sort of layer one access to build to the network that you really want to build while also being able to plug into that interoperability is something that it definitely shouldn't be taken for granted. I think that's exactly the stance that we took with privacy as well, because I love to sort of make this example, right? Like if anyone wants to look at your credit card information, right, or all your transactions for the past 30 days, like they can't. They have to essentially steal your identity and then like go log in as you, and then they can view your information. But that's obviously illegal, right? But it's not illegal on chain. All I need to know is your Bitcoin address or your dot address or something, right? And I can see all the transactions you made. And it's not just about transacting in the sense of sending money to whom, or from where, what time, et cetera, but also the interaction on different applications, right? I can see what applications you've touched, how much you've put into different applications, right? Think 3 to 5 years from now, as the application ecosystem on top of blockchain really blossoms, right? Like, what does that mean for your privacy? It means that it's no longer about Facebook or Google having your data and then exploiting that, or reselling it, or maybe a case of Cambridge Analytica, quote unquote, hacking your data, right? It's literally anyone with an internet access who has any access to your data. And so it becomes an even bigger problem of privacy in Web3. But the problem is that, in the Web2 space, I think we've been conditioned to think that privacy is not necessary. It very much is, right? It's just in the user experience side, we make it hard for people to, use or get privacy, because it's easier to check a box and say, I agree to give like access to all the cookies, or, go through a whole laundry list of different cookies you want to uncheck, right? The user experience is against privacy in Web2, and we don't want to see that in Web3. And so that's why I think privacy is definitely a critical piece of the blockchain ecosystem. And starting with Polkadot is like the perfect place to start because of the layer one interoperability, and because it is a new ecosystem that's just emerging, right? And building in privacy on day one is a much better option than building in privacy in like year 5, right? So definitely a lot of things going on there for privacy for Polkadot, and hopefully we'll be around for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like when each of you are talking about the value each project is adding to the ecosystem, it's really, exponentially even more value when you talk about interoperability between that. So for instance, like market of Bitcoin users is much greater than the market of dot holders. And for instance, now with Interlay, Bitcoin users are easily able to on-ramp into the DOT ecosystem, and then go to Manta to kind of gain the privacy using some private transaction, then go over to Centrifuge or Altair to get a share of real estate or something like that. So this is something that each team has value. Each project does have value, but when combined through the ease and quickness and cheap interoperability that's on Polkadot, it just makes the value altogether greater than some of the parts.
I think what's easy too for people to not necessarily see the inner workings of is this chicken and egg problem that I think Polkadot is sort of brilliantly able to dodge. And just to color that. So, when we're working with AMMs that want to deploy to Moonriver right now, the first question they ask is, what kind of assets do you have? And so right now, of course, XCM isn't enabled fully. And so most of the assets we have are bridged in or they're native assets. And that's all well and good. But when they're showing up because they want all the assets on Altair. They want all the assets that are available on Manta and Kintsugi BTC. So when they're asking these questions, it's like, yeah, Moonriver is really great, doing what we need it to do for now. When can we get all of these other assets in? Because that's where the really interesting stuff happens. That's where things become, a kind of this network effect swell in a way that usually takes months and years on other chains. And so we're able to do that because we can bring in BTC really quickly. We can bring in Air. We can bring in, we have several bridges to Ethereum and elsewhere as well from Moonriver itself. And once those assets are brought into the Kusama ecosystem, then they're available to all of these other assets all these other applications on Kusama as well. And so it is very much so faster because, Sushi, for example, can have confidence that BTC is an asset they get access to really quickly, which makes them more likely to build their smart contracts now rather than waiting for all those assets to show up. And then, of course, once there are more DEXs and marketplaces and all of these rich applications, that means more assets want to come and join. And so we've had Frax hop on board. I think I saw Mai deployed the other day. And so I think that is really interesting and is very much unique to the way that Polkadot has structured this in the parallel chain concept. We're all kind of working at the same time to make these things happen, which makes us move faster, which makes us hit these sort of traction milestones faster. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. Nope. Let's move on. Okay. So with that in mind, I know, Cassidy, you had spoken a little bit about some interesting use cases in terms of funding these pools. Has anyone else seen or started working on some interesting use cases with other parachains, or maybe with a mix of like smart contracts on parachain A and assets on parachain B or something like that?
Sure. I mean, I can jump in briefly. So with Bitcoin, I think we've had conversations with nearly all parachain projects that are live on Kusama by now. And basically just right now, the most advanced stages of integration are with Karura and Moonriver. So we're actively working on testing the XCM integration to make sure that we can move over BDC. And of course, then this enables a lot of new use cases. I mean, on Moonriver, the amount of use cases is, it's endless, right? Because you have so many new projects deploying there, starting with SolarBeam, for example, just having pools that allow you to trade against BDC, and then I'm sure there'll be many, many more. On Karura, a very interesting use case, and actually we've written up a blog post outlining like 5 key use cases of KBTC and Karura. And one of them is you could, and we will apply to allow KBTC to be a collateral asset of KUSD, basically. So what you've seen and what you see today on MakerDAO, right? MakerDAO has WBTC as a collateral for DAI, but WBTC is centralized, and you basically trust in a centralized provider to ensure safety of the collateral that is backing DAI decentralized coin. And that's, of course, dangerous. And what we're trying to do with Karura is have this mechanism fully decentralized. So fully decentralized Bitcoin backing a fully decentralized stablecoin the way it should be in DeFi. And that's just one of them. So I'll stop here because I think everyone else will come up with more interesting ideas. But these are the kind of main 2 things that are happening right now. And of course, we're looking forward to having private Bitcoin transactions on Manta. And really, really interesting to see, as already Cassidy mentioned, to explore which pools we can put together to have financing of real world assets by Bitcoin and vice versa potentially.
So I'm really excited about these pieces in particular. I think for those who are maybe less familiar with XCM and all of the work being done in that regard, I think we'll begin to see some really interesting applications become almost accessible from a Kusama deployment perspective very, very soon. I know teams have already been working on this for some time. XCM was sort of just recently upgraded. I guess recent's probably a month ago, but there's still some really interesting progress happening from the team on that side. Do you guys have maybe predictions or anecdotes you want to share in terms of what users can expect from these types of use cases in the next year or so, like what they'll be able to see or interact with?
One of the fun ideas that we have for Altair that I think could be really interesting given this whole NFT hype cycle that we just saw is like getting liquidity for these JPEGs for these art NFTs. So I think in terms of the Kusama use case, Remark has done a really cool job with the NFTs that they have. I think their community is really excited, and I think they've created a really cool product. And what if we could bring over some of these Remark NFTs over to Altair and create a pool out of them and actually finance them with Kuroro Dollar? That's like, I think, a potential use case that we could see in the next year. Obviously, that's like super crypto native, super experimental. One of the things that I also think we're going to see in the next year that's maybe a little bit more boring, but for us is a huge deal, is bringing over our real world asset financing from Ethereum over to Centrifuge Chain. And doing the same asset financing that we're doing, but being able to do it at a fraction of the cost. Because I'll tell you, those gas fees on Ethereum are absolutely insane. And we're really excited to not have to deal with that in the future.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off Cassidy and gas fees, right? Like that is another reason why we decided to build on Polkadot. Apart from the fact that, being an L1, we have much more control and, the gas fees are much, well, I guess the gas fees, right? Like if you think about privacy in its more so fundamental human aspect, right? Like asking someone to pay 50 to $100 or even more on gas fees just to be able to use privacy is not really, it doesn't really adhere to the convention of a fundamental human right anymore. It becomes a luxury. And so I think that's the sort of barrier we're trying to break with privacy on Polkadot. And think about maybe like 3 to 5 years from now, how do we envision Manta Network? I mean, I think we want to be a privacy function on Polkadot where you don't even necessarily know we exist or we're working in the background. Essentially, you are able to use us as a utility, just like you open up your laptop, it's connected to Wi-Fi, and you don't have to worry about who the ISP provider is, right? The ISP is just there in the background doing their job. And an ideal scenario for Manta Network would essentially be, the different wallets that you may use on Polkadot, being able to toggle on and off privacy directly from the wallet rather than having to go to, any type of application. And so there's that reduces the friction of the user experience for privacy in the sense that, one, you don't have to take an extra step of going to any other place and interacting.
In a fully decentralized stablecoin, the way it should be in DeFi. And that's just one of them. So I'll stop here because I think everyone else will come up with more interesting ideas. But these are the kind of main two things that are happening right now. And of course, we're looking forward to having private Bitcoin transactions on Manta. And really, really interesting to see, as already Cassidy mentioned, to explore which pools we can put together to have financing of real world assets by Bitcoin and vice versa potentially.
So I'm really excited about these pieces in particular. I think for those who are maybe less familiar with XCM and all of the work being done in that regard, I think we'll begin to see some really interesting applications become almost accessible from a Kusama deployment perspective very, very soon. I know teams have already been working on this for some time. XCM was sort of just recently upgraded. I guess recent's probably a month ago, but there's still some really interesting progress happening from the team on that side. Do you guys have maybe predictions or anecdotes you want to share in terms of what users can expect from these types of use cases in the next year or so, like what they'll be able to see or interact with?
One of the fun ideas that we have for Altair that I think could be really interesting given this whole NFT hype cycle that we just saw is like getting liquidity for these JPEGs for these art NFTs. So I think in terms of the Kusama use case, Remark has done a really cool job with the NFTs that they have. I think their community is really excited, and I think they've created a really cool product. And what if we could bring over some of these Remark NFTs over to Altair and create a pool out of them and actually finance them with Kuroro Dollar? That's like, I think, a potential use case that we could see in the next year. Um, Obviously, that's like super crypto native, super experimental. One of the things that I also think we're going to see in the next year that's maybe a little bit more boring, but for us is a huge deal, is bringing over our real world asset financing from Ethereum over to Centrifuge Chain. And doing the same asset financing that we're doing, but being able to do it at a fraction of the cost. Because I'll tell you, those gas fees on Ethereum are absolutely insane. And we're really excited to not have to deal with that in the future.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off Cassidy and gas fees, right? Like that is another reason why we decided to build on Polkadot. Apart from the fact that being an L1, we have much more control, and the gas fees are much. Well, I guess the gas fees, right? Like if you think about privacy in its more so fundamental human aspect, right? Like asking someone to pay. Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off Cassidy and gas fees, right? Like that is another reason why we decided to build on Polkadot. Apart from the fact that being an L1, we have much more control, and the gas fees are much. Well, I guess the gas fees, right? Like if you think about privacy in its more so fundamental human aspect, right? Like asking someone to pay 50 to $100 or even more on gas fees just to be able to use privacy is not really. It doesn't really adhere to the convention of a fundamental human right anymore. It becomes a luxury. And so I think that's the sort of barrier we're trying to break with privacy on Polkadot. And think about maybe like 3 to 5 years from now, how do we envision Manta Network? I mean, I think we want to be a privacy function on Polkadot where you don't even necessarily know we exist or we're working in the background. Essentially, you are able to use us as a utility, just like you open up your laptop, it's connected to Wi-Fi, and you don't have to worry about who the ISP provider is, right? The ISP is just there in the background doing their job. And an ideal scenario for Manta Network would essentially be, the different wallets that you may use on Polkadot, being able to toggle on and off privacy directly from the wallet rather than having to go to, any type of application. And so there's that reduces the friction of the user experience for privacy in the sense that one, you don't have to take an extra step of going to any other place and interacting or other buttons. And two, there is no high cost for privacy because we are on Polkadot. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we see Manta Network going.
Yeah, I can totally echo that myself. Last week I was trying to test Tornado Cash on Ethereum with like just 0.1 ETH, and the gas fees were 0.11. So that was like, it cost as much as I wanted to gain privacy as for the gas fees. And the alternative, they would argue, is to use like a layer 2. And in order to join a layer 2, it also costs a lot in gas fees. And to re-exit that layer 2 up back onto Ethereum would still cost just as much. So this privacy should not be a luxury. It should be extremely democratic and allow anyone to have that because it is a right, especially when we're dealing with these public ledgers. Yeah, it's really good to hear that we're going to get a privacy layer that's really not going to cost half of the bags of everyone and only be reserved for the elite. There was something else regarding like some exciting new things is, well, we don't have any parachains ourselves. There is a vote right now on the Kusama network to have the first common good parachain with nCointer. And anyone can go to pokeassembly.io to see the status of that vote, but that's for nCointer providing a decentralized identity framework on Kusama. But that's something I'm excited about coming up in the next year, is to have a first common good parachain and to see what other kinds of ideas the community has for common good parachains that aren't can benefit the whole ecosystem beyond just the Web3 ecosystem.
I think just StateMine counts, right? StateMine is a common good parachain. So it's the first non-parity one, maybe?
Yeah, it's the first non-parity one. It's StateMine on Kusama and Statement on Polkadot.
Yep. Very cool. Okay, so we have a few minutes left here, about 13 minutes on the hour. So I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of hand the floor over again to Manta and Interlay and Centrifuge to talk about the parachain auction. So obviously Manta's is live now. I don't think I've seen details with Centrifuge or Interlay teams yet. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to discuss or share in that regard, but I think, as much as the first batch is happening right now, the second batch, I believe, starts right after. So these timelines are upon us. They're happening very soon.
Yeah, super soon. I think, funny enough, or maybe great minds think alike, I think Interlay and Centrifuge are opening the crowd loan next Wednesday. Did I get that right, Alexi?
Perhaps. We've not officially announced, but yeah, it's happening next week, definitely. Yeah. Actually, I think we're one day. Actually, if I'm very honest, I think it's gonna be Tuesday for us, but around the same time.
Ooh. Okay, nice. That's exciting. Yeah, we're planning on next Wednesday, and we've got our countdown up now on the site, and no specific numbers listed yet. So I guess keep your eyes peeled for that. But we've got T-minus 7 days to lift off there, and I think hopefully on our standalone chain, we've also got hopefully a nice Christmas holiday present for everyone with the real world asset market on Aave coming up.
Cool, amazing. I really look forward to those details. And yeah, I mean, the reason I think on our website it's 15th. The reason why we moved it up is that something else very big is happening sometime around that date, and we didn't want the two big events to collide. Without going into too many details, but those who have been following Kintsugi and Interlay probably know what I'm talking about. The details around the crowd loan have actually been up for a week now, a bit longer actually. So you can find all details if you go to our docs page, which has been completely restructured and rewritten, and you can find all information that you could ever need on Interlay, Kintsugi, or InterBTC there. It's docs.interlay.io. You'll see that we are going to batch 2. 10% of the token supply is allocated to the Paradrop, to crowd loans. And there's quite a few interesting bonuses going on. So there's a 10% early bird bonus if you contribute before the actual first auction starts. And then we've got 2 challenges, so a quiz and a challenge on minting InterBTC on testnet, which also gives you additional bonuses if you then participate in the crowd loan. And then, as before, a referral program, a strong supporters bonus, and then a little token of gratitude for our Kintsugi supporters, for those who've actually made it possible for us to go live on Kusama through this whole roller coaster. There is a small token that you can find if you check out the crowdloan page, and also help us go live on Polkadot. And then last but not least, an alpha leak will be that Kintsugi KBTC minting will go live very soon. And because we want to cross-incentivize both Kintsugi and Interlay, there'll be another bonus structure coming up for those who actually mint KBTC or run vaults, and then also want to support us in the Polkadot crowd loans. There will be additional rewards for these supporters and essentially early contributors to the ecosystem. And yeah, I'll stop here, but super exciting. So we really can't wait to go live and to kick things off. And as you'll see, this time we've learned from our mistakes. We're starting early, and we're really going to aim for whatever early slot we can get.
How did you guys approach the hard cap this time? I'm curious.
Well, we learned the lesson. So what we've done is we've put a very high hard cap into the system, but then there's a soft cap. And how it works is essentially the soft cap is still very, very high. It's double of what I think Parallel is currently has locked up, and they're winning the slot. So the soft cap, and this is also what we calculate the rewards on, is our 21 million dot, which is already very, very high. And then should we surprisingly past that, then there's still the opportunity. You still can contribute in theory, and then we'll have additional bonuses potentially kick in to make sure that we maintain the same kind of ratio of inter to contributor.
Wow, I love that nod to 21 million as a soft cap.
Yeah, me too. That's awesome.
That's very Interlay. And yeah, I mean, for those of you that don't know, Manta Network is fighting the good fight right now, and we are live as a parachain auction for crowd loaning, and so we're trying to get the 5th auction right now. Very competitive in this space. You know, there's also a couple of other projects involved in this as well. And I think that the actual candle process doesn't really start until I think this Saturday. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, so you know, up until then, we are still trying our best, and we've got 15% of our network set aside for the crowd loan. And you know, there are referral rewards, and also as part of the 15%, similar to Interlay and what Lexi just explained in terms of using the actual service, the actual network, we have something like that as well. 3% of the 15% that we've allocated is for a crowd loan bonus when crowd loaners use our private payment service to, you know, get the community incentivized to try our products out and, you know, get a better idea of what it means to have privacy on Polkadot. So yeah, I mean, we're live right now, and so, you know, if you guys are curious, just go to polka.js or crowdloan.manta.network.
I love that. The 3% bonus for using your product, it's genius. I love it. What a great way to get people engaged and using the network, but also to get them to try out what the world with actual privacy could look like. Cool. Well, so we have about 5 minutes left. I do see we have someone who's requested to speak. Do you guys, the folks on the panel right now, have any other questions either for each other or any final comments before we let a couple people up?
I guess my comment is just, I mean, it feels competitive at times, but I'm really excited to see all of these projects go live.
Very cool. Okay, let me just see. Kathy, can you help me add this person?
Yeah, I see that his mic is connected. Here you go. Hey, Derek. Can you hear us? Hi, Derek. I feel like you are already a speaker. Let me know if you can hear us and your mic is fine. I also see Luke Crypt here, so maybe we can try with Luke.
I would add too, for those of you who are using Twitter Spaces for the first time or one of the first few times, there's not great compatibility desktop. Oh, go ahead.
I have a very basic question actually. There are already some other networks like Avalanche, Near, FTM, and so on, who also claim to have good EVM compatibility. How would you compare this with Polkadot and Kusama? Can you maybe say a few words about decentralization or privacy or whatever, or openness? What is the big advantage of Polkadot?
I feel like I can probably take this one with Phil because there were a lot of components to that question. But I think, you know, the real advantage of Polkadot is this interoperability with shared security. And just to throw one more buzzword in, this, you know, heterogeneous style chain. These parachains are each very different from each other, but yet share the same substrate backend. So to draw that through, like Moonbeam, totally customized for this EVM use case. Manta, customized for privacy. Interlay, you know, working on getting BTC assets into the ecosystem. Centrifuge has their not only TinLake, of course, as an application, but also their chain itself is customized for these DeFi use cases. And beyond that, first launched as a standalone chain and is now integrating with these networks. So they're all very different and have had different approaches to market, something that is uniquely enabled by Polkadot. But beyond that, you know, the Moonbeam Ethereum compatibility, the way we build it is that it goes beyond the EVM, right? We worked with Parity to build the EVM that is part of Frontier. But we also implemented Web3 RPCs, so all of these tools work out of the box. You can use Moonriver and Moonbeam in MetaMask with the same addresses in the same way that you would Ethereum addresses. And so in that way, what we've seen is it's just a much lower barrier to entry, and it enables us to bring more projects and more users into the ecosystem very quickly. But that is something that we as a parachain are able to work on because Polkadot has this heterogeneous parachain concept that allows us to customize our chain for this specific use case. So I don't know, Phil, if you have anything you want me to add to that as the unofficial advocate here of Polkadot.
No, I mean, it's regarding EVM compatibility. Moonbeam has been at the forefront of this, and there are other chains, parachains, that will have EVM compatibility, but not as much at the focus as Moonbeam has, and that Moonriver currently has on Kusama. I've been using it a bit myself, and it's so smooth. Yeah, I use MetaMask. It just works the same way with, insanely cheap gas fees and really, really fast, and very familiar experience to the end user, as well as a familiar experience to the dApp developer, who can benefit from, Etherscan support, truffle support, and all the tools that they're familiar with. On the other side, what really, in my opinion, what sets Polkadot aside, yes, we have interoperability, we have all, the kind of heterogeneous specialization, where each team is focusing on its own goals. Manta with privacy, for example. The thing is, what enables them, they each have their own governance, they each have their own community running it. Now, this is also true for many dApps on Ethereum. The upgradability is the real difference maker with the framework of Substrate that allows them to build these chains. The pace at which they're able to upgrade these chains, as we've been able to upgrade Kusama and Polkadot with the community's support, that is really the edge that Polkadot has, is this real upgradability combined with the interoperability and specialization of communities. So you can have a pluralistic approach to a blockchain ecosystem where you can be a Moonbeam fanatic and not really necessarily care what's going on the relay chain layer at Polkadot, or not necessarily care what's going on with Centrifuge. And you're not going to really step on each other's toes, as what's been happening with these other architectures like Ethereum that's existed before. So I think upgradability is the big one. It's really smooth. There's no forks. It just works, and it's all done transparently through community governance.
We're at time here. Derek, I just wanted to check to see if your mic worked, and if not, I'll let these fine speakers go on with their day. I'm seeing a no. Okay. Well, at that, thank you guys all for your time. This has been an absolute joy for one, but a good opportunity for me to catch up on what everyone's been working on, because we don't get to meet up enough from a parachain perspective. So thank you each for joining us. We'd love to do this again at some point, and hopefully next time we have some really interesting live use cases that we can point to and talk about from an interoperability perspective.
Yeah, super excited for that. Thanks, everyone. Also really enjoyed hearing about this, and thanks, Katie, for hosting.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Katie and Moonbeam team for hosting, and thanks, Cassidy, for putting this all together. Really appreciate being invited here.
Yeah, thank you, Moonbeam team, for hosting. And I just want to say, check all of our websites here. We are all hiring, so anyone listening right now, we're all hiring in technical and non-technical roles.
Exactly. And we're all competing for the best minds in the space. So take a look at our websites. And also, I think there's a few bulletin boards like .jobs where you can find most of these job postings listed as well. Thanks a lot for organizing and for having me.
Thank y'all.
Cool. Thanks. We'll sign off now. Have a good day, everyone.